A new report from the U.S. Central Bank now actually shows that, through a revaluation of gold, you can directly buy Bitcoin, and this is indeed being published by the Federal Reserve. That's a pretty bold statement, and we absolutely need to take a closer look at what's behind it. Is this already a direct signal to sell gold and use it to buy Bitcoin? At the same time, a video from Jack Miller's has surfaced in which he claims that the U.S. has classified information and that's why they aren't buying Bitcoin, and also why they're not being transparent with U.S. citizens about it. He even goes so far as to say that the U.S. may have found out that other nations now have more Bitcoin than the U.S., and that's why the U.S. will secretly fill their own pockets again, or has to, before they make any audit public, before they disclose how much Bitcoin they have, and before they announce any further Bitcoin purchases. They want to be the leader of the world when it comes to Bitcoin. The problem is, right now they're not, and that's why they're embarrassed, and that's why they have to put on this whole shit show. This is extremely explosive. The Federal Reserve opening up, and on the other hand, secret information about a potential Bitcoin shit show in the US. How crazy is that? But before we take a look at all of this, let's smash the like button down below for higher Bitcoin prices, for the epic Bitcoin bomb, for peace, for freedom. And also, super important, what Pius the Banker just posted here. As a former Wall Street employee, I learned that most money is made in inefficient and mispriced markets. When the masses come in, meaning the big crowd, returns start to decline. Bitcoin is the most undervalued asset I have seen in my entire career. That means that's exactly what Michael Saylor says. You need something that everyone needs. Or no, he puts it like this. The best investment is something everyone needs, that no one can ban, and no one understands. And that's exactly the combination we have here with Bitcoin. And that's why it's probably the most underrated investment ever, but the window of opportunity will eventually close. In 5 or 10 years, it won't be so underrated anymore. There was also a comment below from Leo Mathis, who says Bitcoin will always be underrated. And I'm not so sure about that. What is probably meant by that is that it will always deliver relatively good returns, even compared to other investments, even when Bitcoin is already established. That's certainly true. But of course, the big, massive opportunity is happening now, in the next 3, 4, 5 years. That really needs to be clear here. And we can also see here, hey, just in, publicly traded gold mining company ECR Minerals announces plans to buy Bitcoin. So now we're seeing even more gold mining companies betting on Bitcoin. I've reported on this from time to time, that the gold bugs are turning to Bitcoin. This also shows the same argument again. The flows are moving from gold into Bitcoin, not the other way around, even though some gold bugs always try to tell us, yeah, people are moving from Bitcoin into gold. No, that's not true. The flows are from gold ETFs into Bitcoin ETFs, and now even some gold mining companies are not just betting on gold anymore, but are actually betting on Bitcoin as well, either because they are more convinced by it here, or simply as a way to diversify. And now we really have to take a close look at what's happening at the Federal Reserve. First of all, we have Donald Trump here, who says he has finished his list for the next Fed chairman, meaning Jerome Powell will be replaced. He has narrowed it down to the last 3 candidates, and now there are 2 Kevins among them who are supposed to be very, very good. So Donald Trump will definitely appoint people who benefit him, who will absolutely do what he wants. And that basically means lower interest rates, pumping more money into the market, and higher stock and Bitcoin prices. That's already very, very bullish. And now check this out. In the past, we've had statements from Jerome Powell, and I have to say, the Federal Reserve, the U.S. Central Bank, hasn't been completely opposed to Bitcoin. They've been relatively neutral here. Jerome Powell said you can use Bitcoin. Banks are allowed to use Bitcoin. But he also made it very clear that he wouldn't add Bitcoin to the central bank's reserves. But then Cynthia Lummis also said that this was just a smokescreen, that it wasn't really true, because outwardly he would say that Bitcoin was more or less neutral, but secretly there are, of course, also factions within the Federal Reserve that absolutely rule it out, that definitely see Bitcoin as hostile. And in the past, they have acted on that, and it's only very, very recently that they've started to pivot. And that's why it's not really credible. And now, in fact, this massive report has come out, suggesting that the funds from the future revaluation of gold could be used to buy Bitcoin. And that's a huge story. There's already an article in Forbes about this. The Treasury is sitting on a 750 billion gold hoard officially valued at 11 billion. So, you could take the gold that's currently valued at 11 billion and pump it up to 750 billion. That means you'd have a delta, or newly realized gains, of almost 750, well, not quite, about 739 billion, which could then be used to buy Bitcoin. And I mean, just think about it, no, that's wrong, 39 billion. No, wait, now I'm completely confused. 739 billion, that's how you have to say it, that could then flow into Bitcoin here. And sure, not all of that is going to flow in, but just imagine if only 10% of that goes into Bitcoin. That's obviously insane, but the thing is, like I've already told you, the US really has to buy a lot of Bitcoin. It's not enough to just buy 10 Bitcoin here, because otherwise the nation-state FOMO will kick in and then they won't be the leader. If they want to be the leader here, the crypto stronghold, the crypto capital of the world, then they have to buy hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin, 500,000, 1 million. Something along those lines is what they need to buy. The report also says that the rising gold price and the $37 trillion debt problem in the US could lead to gold being revalued, simply because they depend on these gains that are still unrealized. And now there's actually a report here, and there's also a section, which I'm going to read to you now, that goes into detail about Bitcoin. And it really is a new report. You can see here, it's from August. It's only just now come to light. Often, when the Fed or the ECB publish some reports, it only pops up on social media a day or two later, because of course people need to read through all the reports first. Here it says, in the US, the idea has come up in the context of helping to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve or a Southern, it says Southern here, I'm not sure. Probably Southern Wealth Fund, and the use of revaluation proceeds was proposed in recent legislation by Senator Lummis. So it's very clearly included in the report that they're considering revaluing gold and using that to buy Bitcoin. And it's definitely not contradicted or anything here. Instead, it's stated quite openly and straightforwardly in this report. And of course, many people are now interpreting this as a bullish signal. I'm not sure if it's really that bullish, to be honest. I'd say it's somewhat neutral to positive, something along those lines, but it's not, let's say, not a confirmation that the US central bank is going to buy Bitcoin tomorrow. What I actually found even more intense here was the video. From Jack Mallers that popped up here, where he actually addresses the shit show in the US and says there's secret information and that there might be massive manipulation going on. The media is being manipulated when you actually have way fewer Bitcoin than you want to present to the outside world. They want to show that they're big America, that they have the most Bitcoin, that they're the Bitcoin superpower, and so on. But in reality, that might not be the case at all if they've gambled away their Bitcoin and so on. And Jack Mallers actually warns about this in a powerful clip, which we now have to watch together. And I think it should also be clear, no matter how the US buys Bitcoin here, the price will go parabolic unless they do it completely in secret.
The US government has kind of let us down in not giving us the full audit of how much Bitcoin the US government owns. That's just a fact. They said they would and they haven't.
So, it's absolutely a fact that the US has screwed us over here. And that's coming from someone who's actually more on the US side here, like Jack Mallers. And now here come the hard facts.
Clearly that information is sensitive, or else they would disclose it.
So what he means by that is that the information is secret, or that it's sensitive and can't be made public, because otherwise they would have already released it. I mean, if they wanted to show strength here, if they could really move forward as a Bitcoin nation, they definitely would have published it. But there are some things here that just don't add up. Now pay attention to what's not right here.
And Bo Hines, one of the representatives of the White House, came out and said, we're not ready to disclose that information. We consider that classified sensitive information at the moment. Why is that sensitive information? What's sensitive about that? And you get a really big clue there, guys. I think that the US government is ashamed of its Bitcoin position. It wants to be a leader.
The United States will be the crypto capital of the planet and the Bitcoin superpower of the world, and we'll get it done.
So basically, the US is embarrassed about its Bitcoin position. When they found out they're not the leader, they thought they want to be, but they're not. And of course, that also explains why they're not making all this public.
And they must have discovered that they're not the leader they thought they were. That's my guess. Could be a hot take. I think that these guys are realizing that the Democrats sold off a bunch of that Bitcoin, and they don't want to make an announcement until they can build the position back.
And that's a pretty bold take, and it also explains why we're not much higher yet. Because, of course, the US has, first of all, sold Bitcoin. Of course, that also created additional selling pressure last year, otherwise we might have climbed up even faster. And secondly, they're now trying to buy back the Bitcoin in the background. I don't know exactly how they're doing it, through Bitcoin mining, through confiscation, or other methods. There are various options on the table right now, and only when they've accumulated enough Bitcoin again can they say, hey, folks, we didn't mess anything up. And the thing is, Donald Trump might now have to clean up the mess the Democrats made here. He'll probably be happy to make it public, saying, Biden, you fool. Why did you sell Bitcoin here? Why did you sell Bitcoin here? How can you sell Bitcoin? But the problem is, if he does that, then China will also know they don't have that much Bitcoin, and maybe China will realize, okay, now they're the leader and all that. And that's basically like a weakness. That's also something that's always discussed a bit in warfare and so on. Should you show weakness or should you not show weakness? I definitely think it's good to show weakness, but I'm not out here at war or anything, or operating at a nation-state level. I'm just here on an individual level. And I always find it very, very appropriate to show weakness, to talk openly with people. Okay, what's going well? What's not going so well? But if you're operating at the nation-state level, as Caesar already said back in the day, never show signs of weakness. I don't know if that's the right way, but that's how many major nations do it.
Do I like the fact that they told us they'd give us a transparent audit and they didn't? No, of course I don't like that. But is my takeaway that the US government is too incompetent to count up a bunch of UTXOs? No, of course not. My takeaway is pretty simple. I think that that's sensitive information because the US government wants to be the Bitcoin superpower. And what they realized is their holdings are a threat to that brand identity. I do think that the US government is not done with their strategic Bitcoin reserve. Whitehouse.gov/crypto. I've been in this space for 13 years. Never in my life did I think we would have a web page on the White House website. And let's be clear, it should be whitehouse.gov/Bitcoin.
He also says very clearly that he still has hope that the US will buy Bitcoin gear. Maybe they'll even make it more transparent to the public and so on. All of that could still happen. We really need to keep a close eye on this. The thing is, and you make a good point here, it's honestly pretty crazy. If we look back, no one could have imagined a few years ago that there would be a homepage where the White House itself talks directly about Bitcoin, or rather about crypto. And we've already come a really long way. And of course, people have gotten very spoiled by everything that's happening. And of course, people always want the next big thing, like buying 1 million here, or this and that and the other. But often, things just move a bit slower, kind of like with all those companies. My colleague said, yeah, they'll all come in a few months, in a year or so, but then it actually took another 2, 3, 4 years before everything happened. Of course, it could be that there are still some slow-moving processes here in the US as well. I don't know. Let me know in the comments below if you know better. If you still want to buy Bitcoin, I'll put a link for you below to 21 Bitcoin. You can buy Bitcoin here easily and securely. With the code BitcoinHotel, you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. Exactly, folks, check it out. See you. Until then, peace out.